Hello and welcome to week one, day one of the fall 2025 Web Development Technologies course. My name's Jim Kaufman and I will be your instructor for this course. So as far as what I'm going to go ahead and cover today, a little bit of overlap. I did have that welcome video that's out there in the YouTube channel. And so some of this will be a little bit redundant from that, but there's going to be some additional things as well. Because I am going to go over inside ranking and the syllabus and a bunch of other things prior to doing the chapter one lecture. So real quick here, I'll go ahead and do just quick instructor introduction, course introduction. It's important to get off to a good start. And I did want to mention that I will go ahead starting. I don't want to do it this first week. People are just trying to get their environment set up and get everything going. So I'm going to go ahead and schedule some one-on-one meetings with each student, so I can just kind of get to know you and see where you're at, see how you feel about things, and especially maybe giving you a little bit of time. If I do it the second, third week, you're already done some assignments and that, so I can get a little bit of feedback from you on that as well. And then we're going to go ahead and go through inside ranking, the main page, and the coursework. And as far as the coursework, just really what you're assigned to do this week. Syllabus review. So we'll go ahead and I want to talk about grade weightings, make sure you understand that, and just the various tasks that really need to be accomplished here this week so you can actually do your work, right? Like setting up your environment, etc. Then I'll go ahead and do a lecture on chapter one. And if time permits, I'll go ahead and do a written test. Also wanted to mention, so for the most part, these live lectures, are going to be, somewhere around 2.5 to 3 hours, kind of depending on what we're doing. And for this course, we'll have that. And then plus, in addition to that, I'm going to have some other videos I'll send you, some separate videos, and all of this stuff will be on the playlist, right? And just reiterate again, so, because I know some students work during the day, they're unable to attend. So everything will be out on the YouTube playlist, so you can always view everything there. So, and a few slides here that I grabbed just off my welcome video. Just kind of reiterate some things. So I'm your instructor, Jim Kaufman. I worked for years as a software developer, multiple different companies. And I kind of tell you a little bit about how I kind of got started. So, obviously I started back in I'm dated here. I'm kind of old, but so back in the late 90s, I was working at I had a couple different jobs, and I was working part-time at a real estate agency. And I was actually, using we used the computer for like looking up listings. And, this was very early days of the internet. And actually, the broker who, kind of ran the office didn't even know we had access to the internet back then, right? So, and all of a sudden I was just playing around and discovered, wow, we have, because a lot of the listings for the real estate, it was kind of a separate kind of network. It was kind of outside the internet itself. So that's kind of a separate thing that was all available on our computers there. And like I said, the internet was kind of separate, and I kind of stumbled across this. Wow, we have internet access here. And I just started looking at different pages and stuff and started saying, wow, I wonder how they did this. I wonder how they did that. I kind of got very interested in that. So I kind of started doing some research on, how I can create my own web pages. And I started playing around with that a little bit. And, started doing some research, find out, there's a lot of opportunities as far as software development and that. So I ended up going and enrolling in a program through St. Louis University. It was kind of a web development administration type certificate program. So I went ahead and enrolled in that. And during my time there, so I'll tell you kind of how my job started because I think this is important as well. Because a lot of times we think you get a degree and then you just kind of fill out applications or submit your resumes all over. But actually, the way I got my very first job working in technology was basically from that being in that program. So I was in that program through St. Louis University, and there was another student in my class, older than me, and he and this is back in like 2000, so about 25 years ago, and he was in my class and found out, just being in there, he sat by me and kind of started talking, and he was a manager at A.G. Edwards, which A.G. Edwards is not around anymore. It's actually now Wells Fargo bought him out, but it was a stock brokerage company that was downtown St. Louis, and so he worked there, and just got to know him and stuff. And one thing, I was really into what I was doing back then. I spent a lot of time learning. I was always there for every class. Some students weren't always there, didn't always show initiative. I was always there when the class started, and even sometimes a little bit after the class. And this manager was there, kind of noticed that. And actually, I helped out some other different people in the class and stuff like that. And I think I made a very good impression, and wasn't really my thought of doing that. It just kind of happened. And the very last day of class, actually the whole certificate program, it was kind of a short program, but it was multiple weeks, but it was a very short certificate program. And that very last day, he mentioned to me, he said, "Hey, just wanted to let you know if you're interested, I've got a job for you at A.G. Edwards as a junior programmer." So the whole reason I really want to kind of tell this story is just to let you know that a lot of times, getting a job and stuff and getting into it happens by making contacts, right? Making a contact. People know that you're doing, like for us, for this Rankin technical program, people know you're into this, contacting people. Really, that a lot of that kind of stuff really helps in getting that first job. It's hard to get a job just throwing resumes all over the place. And during this program, and not just this course, but I'll talk about some in this course and these other courses within the program here. I'll talk about some tools, some ideas you can have to kind of really get your name out there and keep your name out there, so you can kind of through networking, basically through personal networking, let people know that you're out, you're out here and you're studying and you're wanting to get a job in this area, right? So that's kind of my story, how I got started. And so, I did worked in multiple places besides A.G. Edwards. Also worked at MasterCard for a while, and also did a lot of government contracting work at different agencies. And then I also did a little bit of managing on software teams as well. So that's kind of my story, and someday you'll have your story too, and I'd like to hear about that later as well. Okay, so in this course, what we're going to learn is the basics of this course is really the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, and these are essential technologies for creating websites. Okay, and then we'll use some coding techniques and best practices to build effective web pages. We'll go ahead and use some different frameworks in this course, such as Bootstrap. And also towards the end of this class, we will go ahead and go through the React framework and show you how to do a little bit more advanced type applications. And the React framework is actually something that we will be using in one of the second year courses. Okay, so you kind of get a little bit of introduction to that. As far as development tools are concerned, in this course, we'll go ahead and do Git for version control. And this Git is a way to version your software. So anytime you have a check-in, we'll talk about this more tomorrow and going forward. But it's a way to manage your changes to your files, okay? And then we'll go ahead and check that code into what's called GitHub. And So as far as that's concerned, though, this is we use this throughout all four of these courses. We're using Git as our version control, and you can also we're going also in this course we working with GitHub Desktop. There are some other ways to get your code from your local machine to a GitHub repository. But for this course, we'll probably stick pretty much with GitHub Desktop. I might introduce you later on towards the end to some other ways to do that as well. And the main thing we're going to be using to edit our code is what's called Visual Studio Code. And just wanted to make a note that anybody who's already taken the C# course this past semester, Visual Studio, there's two different kind of versions, two different pieces of software that's made by Microsoft. There's that has Visual Studio in its name, and there's basically the Visual Studio 2022 version, and that's really for programming languages like C# and others, .NET Platform C#. And also there is what's called Visual Studio Code, and Visual Studio Code can be used for lots of different languages. It can actually be used for C#, but the Visual Studio 2022 one is a little, it's a much more of an integrated environment where you can do a lot more with that programming language. Whereas Visual Studio Code can't do as much, okay? But it's great for lots of other languages and for like our HTML, our CSS, or JavaScript, and can be used with lots of other programming languages like Python, etc. Okay? And if all that stuff is a little confusing for you, don't worry about it. You'll learn all this stuff as we go along here. And also in this course, we'll learn techniques to validate your work and ensure that they're compliant with the standards. We'll also use a tool by default. Our browser that we use for this course is pretty much Chrome, and I suggest you really try to stick with that. I know some students have done other ones, Firefox, etc. But I really suggest you probably go ahead and stick with Chrome, just so when we're discussing things and I'm demonstrating some things, it'll be a little easier for you. But there's some tools within Chrome that most users don't really realize there. It's called Chrome Developer Tools, and we can use that to debug and analyze and optimize some web projects. Okay. And so we'll look into that as we move forward in this course. Okay, I do want to reiterate this about succeeding in this course. It's very important to get off to a good start. And I know that we're all busy in life, and there's always things that we have to take care of, but it's really good to be able to spend, be really organized. This course is probably not best, or this program, this online version is probably not best for the people who tend to procrastinate a lot. If you're a procrastinator, it might be a little bit more challenging for you. So you need to really you don't really want to put this off until the weekends. A lot of our work will be due on Sundays. There'll be at some point will be due on Wednesday nights as well. And that may be a different day than that also, but for the most part, your work will be due Sunday. By midnight, I think the assignments have 11:30, but basically close to midnight there on Sunday, and we will have some things that'll be due Wednesday by midnight. And you really just don't want to really put that off, a lot of that stuff, until the weekend to get started on that stuff that's like due Sunday night, because you start running into a few problems and you don't get something to submit it, and you can fall behind very quickly. Really need to space out your time. So like I mentioned before in the welcome video, this is a 14 credit hour course. This isn't like a lot of courses that you have in college, 3 credit hours, 4 credit hours. This is a 14 credit hour course, just this course. So a significant commitment of your time is necessary to do well. And the spring semester of this course is 16 weeks long. To succeed in this course, it's a good rule of thumb to dedicate around 20 plus hours per week, and that could be significantly more or less, and that kind of depends on many factors, and everybody's at a different level. Some people have more experience than others. Some have had other courses or played around on their own. So people are at different levels, and so you just if you don't have as much experience, just hang in there. Keep with it, because really the biggest thing is persistence. Sticking with it. You'll do well. Most of the students that do well, it's because they just kind of stick with it and they're very persistent. Okay. I really work on creating a plan and a schedule. Figure out what days you can work on your assignments. And like I said, don't try to push everything off onto the weekends. Find some time every night, every day, depending on your schedule, and try to make sure you're making progress every single day. The book chapters, the written tests are pretty much based on the book chapters, and also a lot of our assignments really come straight out of the books. So that, not saying you have to necessarily read cover to cover, but the more the better on the book, right? And it'll definitely help you with the written tests, especially. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I'm available as your instructor. We also have a tutor that's been assigned for our course. So I will send you everybody contact information for him. And if you have any, and don't be afraid to ask for help. It's nothing wrong. It's not like you're not capable. It's just we all need help at times, right? So don't be afraid to ask for help. And also, besides the tutor and myself, if for some reason you live like closer to the St. Louis campus and you actually want to go in there, there is this course, which is happening online for us, is also available at the same time at the downtown location. So it's going to be the same exact course, same book, everything. Okay. We may be out of sync on a little thing. Some things might be a little bit different between that instructor and myself. But for the most part, we're using the same materials and so forth. And so if you ever need, if you live close and you'd rather go in there and get some help, that's an option available as well. Okay. So most important, don't give up. You can do this. You just keep pushing, spend the time you need to spend, and you'll do well. Okay. All right. Let's see here. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and take a look at Inside Rankin. So if you log into the Inside Rankin on the main page, and I think all of the students, I think there was just one student that might not have an account, login account yet, so I sent them something separate. So I think everyone else does. So I want to kind of go over some things here. So on this, there's a bunch of handouts in here. You don't really have to worry about this too much. Do want to kind of bring up the idea of the requirements for. This has a laptop, laptop PC requirements, right? So let's see. Actually, I guess I can just download this again. There we go. So operating system, Windows 10 or 11. So I know that and sometimes in some schools they use Macs a lot, and Macs are great. But one thing is, in this program we do a lot of Windows technologies. A lot of the stuff that we're doing here for this course, the HTML, CSS, really doesn't matter so much. But a lot of this window technology, C Sharp, that's Windows, all the .NET stuff. So there's going to be especially, two of the four classes are going to be very Windows technologies. Okay. And when I say Windows, I say Microsoft technologies, right? And so Microsoft is the company that makes Windows as well, right? So a lot of things are going to work better, and you can have some challenges using a Mac or something. You can have some challenges. So kind of important to be using a Windows PC or laptop. And as far as the processor and memory, the more the better on that. I'm not saying that you necessarily have to meet all these requirements on here, but this is just kind of what's recommended. So real quick, as far as like memory is concerned, memory is like if you have, storage is, how much stuff you could store. You're downloading things, you have images, files, whatever. That's how much space you have to save things, right? And in this course, this course and some of the other courses as well, we're going to have a lot of stuff as time goes on, right? You're going to be downloading some different applications, some different files, so it will continuously grow, right? So you need to have a good amount of storage space, okay? As far as memory is concerned, memory is really about multiple, let's say you're running multiple different applications. Let's say you have Visual Studio Code up and you have GitHub Desktop and you've got some other, you have Microsoft Word up, you have multiple things up. Well, when you got a good amount of memory, which is called RAM, random access memory, it helps it helps with multiple things at once, having the multiple applications up and running, okay? And so that's kind of what that's about. Just kind of want to point that out if you're not familiar so much with computers as far as the hardware. I'm more of a software development person than a hardware person, which is the bare bones, the metal and all the physical part of a computer, right? But like I said, you don't necessarily have to fulfill all these requirements. Just best to have a good amount of RAM, have a Windows 10 or 11. A good amount of RAM would be very beneficial, and plenty of storage space. If for some reason you don't have enough storage space, you might not need to clean, might need to remove some old stuff that you're not using anymore. It could be very beneficial. All right. So this is a 16-week course. This is a completely online. Maximum allowable absences. So attendance is taken once a week, and it's based on you submitting assignments. So for this week, if you were in an in-person class, they've already taken attendance. Their classes start at 8:05 every morning. At 8:05, they basically take attendance every day, right? So they have a lot more. They can miss multiple days, right? But for us, everything's by the week. All right. So you'll basically, if a 16-week courses, you're gonna have your attendance is gonna be taken 16 times, and it's taken basically next Monday morning. I will check to see if you submit at work. If you submit at work, you're going to be marked as present. If you did not submit any work, you're going to be marked as absent. Okay. And, I know we all have things that's going on in life, and sometimes, there's emergencies, this or that. But we really, from our perspective here, it's really, we're not supposed to have any excuses like, oh, well, something happened, and, I don't want to be marked as absent even though I didn't turn anything in. I understand that, and I feel for you, but we're supposed to be consistent. So that's why I always say, make sure that you're doing a little bit of work each day. And I'm going to show you, especially tomorrow, we're going to submit some assignments. And so all you got to do is, that's why it's important to kind of submit assignment, Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. Get some assignments submitted through. You try to do it throughout the week. So once you actually submit one assignment, you will be marked as present that next week, right? Even if you didn't do anything else, which isn't a good idea because you start falling behind. But as long as you submit some assignment, you're going to be marked as present. The worst thing is to kind of wait all the way till the weekend and some terrible thing happens that weekend, or some you're unable to do any work that weekend, and so you didn't check anything in, right? So that's why it's important to kind of spread out your work. Make sure you get something in. Make sure you try to get something in early in that week, so you don't even have to worry about this attendance thing. It's a very low bar. All you have to do is, submit some assignment. It has to be kind of a true attempt to complete something, right? You just don't put a couple words in a file and submit it, right? It's got to be, you're actually trying to submit an assignment. So, as far as my availability, actually, I might change this. There is this phone number, but I really tend to, no one really calls on it. And this is a real line. It actually just goes right to voicemail. And I might miss this. So if something's important, something's really important, it's probably best really to contact me by email or on Discord. You can send me a message on Discord. Okay, that's probably the best. As far as office hours, I've got from 7 to 8 and then 1 to 3. I actually might change that a little bit. And as far as this, I there's times I do help students on weekends as well, but I can't guarantee anything on that. I'll do my best, but I have other things to do as well in life. So basically my schedule is Monday through Friday. And I'll try to do what I can to help but on a weekend. But just realize that that's not always necessarily going to happen, right? I might have stuff going on that I'm not available. So try to get things figured out during the week if possible. But like I said, just because if you do have a problem, still contact me. That's fine. Okay, on the weekends. So I want to go over this is a course description. Basically just talks about building modern websites using the technologies we already spoke about a little bit. The course covers introduction to content management systems, accessibility concepts, web ethics, e-commerce, website search engine optimization, and mobile website technologies. And there'll be more than just that, but this is kind of just a little bit of an intro on that. So our course always we have course level outcomes, we have program level outcomes, and we have course level outcomes. In the syllabus, it mentions both, but for just this course, the course level outcomes, and this is what you'll kind of be tested on. We have these hands-on tests. I'll talk about that more in a little bit here, but we have hands-on tests, and they basically test these different course level outcomes. And so these are the ones you're going to be kind of like tested on throughout this course. Write standards compliant HTML5 and CSS to structure, style a web page. Use CSS to position elements as a CSS3 because it's kind of version, and this is also a version number. So use CSS3 to position elements on a web page using responsive web design techniques, including Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a library, and we'll discuss that later. We really don't get into this too much until pretty much towards the end of the book. Okay. Creating websites that include images, lists, tables, video, audio, icons, and animations. Develop web forms that use JavaScript to respond to events. So this is going to be more of the second part of this course. The first part of this course, the first half, approximately half, a little less than half, probably, will be the HTML, CSS, and then the second half will be the JavaScript. Okay, two different books. So the second half will be the JavaScript, and so we'll develop web forms that use JavaScript to respond to events. solve problems using fundamental programming concepts, including variables, branching, and loops, and manipulate the document object model, DOM. We'll learn what this all is using JavaScript and jQuery. So lots of new stuff for you to learn. So this is for your Cengage book. So basically what you're going to want to do, if you haven't already gotten your book, and I'm going to change this as well. I thought this was updated. I guess not. I'm going to change this as well because I want to add the other book. This is for the HTML CSS book, but I also want to add the JavaScript one. You don't need it right away, but I want to add that. So basically, to do this though, for this, you need to really go down here to the bottom, and your screen's going to look different than mine. So maybe I should go ahead and change this to student view so it looks similar. So if you go down here to the bottom, you have this. You want to, at the very bottom, the Cengage Basic Learning Tools. You want to go ahead and click step 1. Okay, it tells you what to do here. Just read through this. Launch this Cengage Basic. And then, let's see what, yeah, for me, yeah, I'm already logged in. If I'd have to log out here first, let me log out. Let me close that again and fire this up. I might be holding on to something. Hopefully it's not going to go. Yeah, sorry, that's just going to go back and logging me back in. So basically click that. It's going to say login, click login. And then if you don't have an account, you'll have a link down there that says create account on that page. So you just want to go ahead and create account, follow the directions there. After you do that, you want to come on back up here and go to, once you get logged into your thing, you're going to want to grab this ISBN number and go ahead and put that in there. And this is going to bring up your thing. And I think what you're going to have to do here, because mine's an instructor, mine's different than yours, but I think once you do that, you'll have this. I think you'll click this, and I think you're going to have to click, like, there's going to be like a button here that says add to my library, my library, and it's going to be add to my, it's already in my library, but it'll say add to my library or something. Okay. And I think you'll have to click that to add that to your library. It might be a little different for you. So let me know if you have any problems. I did want to let you know that this is actually the first time I've been using the Cengage books. We always use a different publisher for the books for the different courses. So this is our first time using Cengage this semester. So we might have to work through some things. Also, there is, I believe, so this is for the online version, but I believe I did talk to somebody, and I believe there's what these print rentals. And so you may be able to see something on your screens after you add that book where you can actually rent the book. And I think that you can actually, they'll send you a book, maybe I guess it's used or something, and at a reduced price if you want a hard copy of the book. Okay. Myself, I have, as an instructor, they kind of sent me a book anyhow, but they sent me a book. So I have a hard copy, and also I can access the online version as well. And that's up to you if you want to look into that. Please let me know if you have problems. I'll work with whoever I need to work with you to get that resolved if you're wanting to get a book and to, I guess, rent. I guess you can buy them as well, maybe, but they're going to cost a lot more. All right. So let me know if you have any problems. I will go ahead and add the other book for the JavaScript book here as well. So you can get the other one. It's not a big deal. You can always get it later. And then all this other stuff in here is pretty, you don't need to worry about this at this point in time. This was kind of actually already covered somewhere or another. setting up your environment. Here's the playlist. Here's the classroom that you should join for your, so you can submit your code, Discord server. And here's just some basic stuff. It's not a requirement, but it's some basic stuff on online tutorials, etc. Okay. So next, let me see. So every week at the beginning, usually on Monday morning, I will make the assignments available so that they're viewable within Inside Rankin. So if you go to Inside Rankin, click on coursework. This is what it'll look like this semester. I mean, this day, this first week. And actually, there is going to be at least one or two little assignments I'm going to be adding to this. Okay. And usually that's not going to be the case, hopefully too much. Usually I try to avoid that. I try to have everything out there. But this is kind of a new curriculum, new book. And so, there may be some adjustments. But these are the assignments. First three are written test. And then you have different these lab assignments, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So these will be, if you're wondering what to do, the syllabus is there just kind of as and we're going to look at the syllabus, is kind of just a general type plan. But, if you want to make sure what is really due, because it might say something on the syllabus, may not be 100% follow 100%. You want to really go to Inside Rankin. So Inside Rankin is going to be telling you this is due Sunday, August 31st by 11 p.m. Okay, 11:30 p.m. And that's basically for all of these. And I'm thinking the reason you don't see anything on this one is I was testing something on the rubric for this. And I will show you kind of what this means, I guess. So all of these are going to be assignments that you're going to be, and I'm going to do assignment. I'm going to show you how to commit your code and everything. So that will be done tomorrow. So I'm going to start working with this one. And the reason this isn't shown is I was just playing around, because the way I'm going to grade your assignments, so you're going to submit your assignments to GitHub. I'm going to take a look at them, and then based on these this is how your assignments will be graded. And this is for the coding assignments. Written test, it's just basically your, right or wrong on those. These are a little different, where if you completed your assignment with no errors, so these are the different assignments. We have apply your knowledge, extend your knowledge, analyzed and improve, consider this your turn, and lab 1 and lab 2. So what I will do as an instructor is I'm going to come in here and I will select, I can't do it anymore because I think I came in here as a student now, but once it's graded, you should be able to come in here and you'll see how it was graded, and if any notes are also associated with it. Okay, so me as an instructor, I will come in and I will grade it based on these things. Complete with no issues, you're going to get 10 points on this one. Okay, this is a 10-point one. Complete with 1 or 2 minor issues, you get 8 points. Complete with 1 major issue, you're going to get 6 points. Complete with multiple you're going to get 4 points. And if it's completely not working, maybe we actually should change that a little bit. But because sometimes you can make a small mistake and some things don't always work either. But maybe you need to change that a little bit. But basically, if you didn't turn it in, or it's just very, very incomplete, like you were nowhere even close, right? You would go ahead and get 0 points in that scenario. Okay. And we'll go through this again later. Let me go back to assignment list. So like I said, this is where everything will be. So here's the questionnaire. Most students have already done the questionnaire. And this is due Wednesday by 8:27. And once you do something, you can actually come in here and go to Gradebook. Let me make sure I'm student view. I don't want to be bringing up. So Gradebook. So this is your Gradebook. I didn't do the questionnaire myself, so this is treating me as a student, kind of, right? But this is the one I just went in there and kind of clicked on everything to make sure that rubric worked. You know, I had 100% on that, and I would be doing the same. But you'll be able to come in here and all your different assignments. So there's going to be some homework assignments that are also going to be part of this I need to add. I'll have that figured out by the end of the day today. But this is where you can come into your grade book and see what your grades are. Okay. So this is the ultimate place to go to make sure you know like when something's due, right? It'll tell you when it's due, and once it's past that date, you won't see it anymore, right? And then it won't be graded automatically. It'll be graded by me later on. Could be usually 1 or 2 days. I'll have everything graded. Sometimes it could extend beyond that. Okay. Usually within a few days, I'm gonna have everything graded. I try to actually have everything graded the next day, Monday following, or the day following something's due, but that isn't always the case. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the syllabus now. So kind of I already went over this from the main page. I did want to mention there's program level student outcomes. We kind of mentioned that there's course level, but these are the program level, and this is basically for all 4 classes. And this is, upon completion of this is what you should be able to do and be able to talk about and show expertise in some areas. Okay, you should be able to demonstrate expertise in these areas. So develop and design websites using the latest versions of these technologies, right? Develop, troubleshoot, implement applications using object-oriented programming and principles and fundamentals. Obviously, if you may not know what this is, C# students will know what that means, but if this is your first course, then you may not know what that means, but you will learn that as we go along in this program. Build data-driven web applications. A lot of our, especially that second year stuff, we use databases, right? The first year the first year courses don't do much database. Little C# stuff with the database. This course we really don't do much with the database. Most of our stuff just done within the files, and we just we render those files we create in the browser, right? We view those in the browser, so most of that data we're using our own, right? We're not going to grab it from a database. And utilize a version control system to manage code. And that's what we're going to be using. We're going to be using GitHub. And GitHub and Git's kind of different thing. GitHub is a place where the code goes. Git is basically an application that's installed on your computer and that tracks the files that have changed. And we'll see how that kind of works a lot more tomorrow. Okay. Here's the 2 books for our course. And I know, this ain't a recent book, but not much has changed. Okay, trust me. In these kind of technologies, these are pretty stable, and so not a lot's changed. Books always take a while for them to. Anytime there's a change, anyhow, it takes a while for them to come out with things. So, this I wouldn't say this is dated, right? Dated if it was, 2010, 2015, yeah. But you start getting into the 2020s here, I would not say that would be dated. Okay, for some technologies, yeah, but for what we're doing, not so much. Okay, a little bit redundant. Course level policies. If you have any question about any policies, make sure you look at the student handbook. did want to kind of mention, I don't think I have it listed here, about the work ethic. So there's also, besides this course, for every course that you have, you also have a work ethic course that's associated with that. And that work ethic course, you will get graded. You kind of start out as meets expectations. It's kind of a meet expectations, a needs improvement, exceeds expectations. And for the most part, most people are just going to be meets expectations, just because there's really not especially for this online course, there's not a lot of interaction with others where you can really get to an exceed thing, and so most of the time most students are obviously going to just be meet expectations, and to get that, actually, you just need to be, what could deduct from from that, would be attendance issues, not doing your work, and then, or having, maybe having problems with other people. So, you need to make sure that, you're always treat everybody with respect, get along with everybody. And, kind of hard to really have too many problems in this online course, but, just the basics there, just try to teach people, everybody that you associate with here at Rankin, be it the other students, your instructor, anybody in the administration, or even outside administration, everybody you deal with while you're here at Rankin, as long as you treat everybody with respect in that, you're going to be good, right? So just keep that in mind. Okay, attendance, kind of already talked about that a little bit, but so for this course, you only can be marked 2 different weeks as absent. So if let's just say you didn't do anything this week, you'd be marked as absent. You didn't do anything next week, you'd be marked as absent. If you did it a third time, the registrar's office will automatically remove you from the course. Okay, you will receive, after your second absence, first absence, second absence, you will receive an early alert. Okay, and we use early alert messages for different things, for grades, if you're struggling, for grades, or also for attendance, we do what's called early alert message. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's possible if you've fallen behind in your grades or not getting it, there'll be that. And the reason of that is so that the student success department can get involved, and just to try to see if they can help you through, whatever you're dealing with. Okay. So that is possible if, like I said, if you fall behind or you reach 2 absences. And like I said, there's no excused absences right here, none. So basically, class will always be held no matter what. And let me caveat that a little bit. So like next Monday's Labor Day, right? So even though, it's a holiday, we don't really count that as a holiday for an online course. And the way that's going to kind of work is it's kind of up to you what you want to do with your holidays. If you want to do some work on that days, one thing I will not do, I will not lecture on those days. I'm not going to meet or lecture on those days. Okay. But obviously, if it's a holiday, sometimes holidays, sometimes people are available to do work, and they may want to do work that day. It's a good day to catch up. They might, because of holidays, some people work. They might be off work. It's a good day to catch up. So it's kind of your option on what you want to do on those days. Okay, that's what that's kind of really all about. So you kind of look at that. Well, maybe the in-person classes they have these holidays. We don't. Well, but how it kind of actually works is your semester ends. Your semester ends sooner than the in-person class, because those holidays are taken away, so they add those at the end of okay, they get added on at the end. So basically, even though officially the holidays don't matter for an online, you actually finish the semester earlier than you're going to do the in-person class. But like I said, I won't be lecturing on that days. I will make all the assignments available. So like if we have assignments for that whole week, if it's a holiday, I will still make those available. Okay. early, usually early on that. If it's a holiday, I just get up and I do that. I'll just make everything available. And so if you want to start working on things, you can work on things. And obviously, if there's past assignments, you can work on that as well. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Real quick note on academic honesty. It's essential, to it's essential to the education process at Ranken, and thus academic dishonesty is a basis for disciplinary action or dismissal. So just make sure you do your own work. In this course, this online course, you can use almost pretty much any resources you need. Obviously, if there's some other student that you knew from past that did their work and you're getting the work from that, that's kind of would be academic dishonesty, right? Or maybe there's somebody else in the class that and they're giving you all their answers, and that's would be academic dishonesty. But besides that, you going out on the internet, you using other resources to do your figure out your work, to do the written test, that's okay to do that. Okay. Late work and retakes. So one thing that has kind of changed, and I'm going to have to see how this works. So before, your written tests were due. When they're due, that's it. They're due, and you get your grade on that, and that's it. You can't retake them. But I believe that it was kind of suggested that if someone, from attendance standpoint, missed attendance or something, that they can make up those tests. So I think we're going to try. You can even, if you don't take a test, you can make that up. But once you take a test, you can't rework that. You can't, if you get a 70%, let's say, you can't retake that test. Okay. And these are short little tests, and like I said, you can use a lot of different resources to do that. Okay. So, but as far as a written test, you cannot retake that. But if you miss it, and I'm going to have to look at that configuration on Inside Ranken, how I can make it available just to one student, because that's kind of one of those challenges. But I'll have to look at that after it's already been past due date. So I'll have to look at that, because we used to not allow that at all. But I'm gonna, one way or another, if there's a test that you did not take and went past the due date and you want to take it, I'll work with you to make sure that we can make that happen. And besides that, all other coursework can be submitted late or for a retake with a 10% penalty. And that's a great benefit, but also you have to make sure that you don't get into a bad habit with that. You say, oh, well, I just don't feel like doing that week. I'll worry about that next week. Honestly, that's kind of a recipe for disaster. And once you start doing that, most students start falling behind. You get a week behind. Some catch up. Usually, you get 2 weeks behind. Things kind of really become a problem. Okay, and if you get multiple assignments behind, it's really, really hard to catch up and be able to pass the course. So that's why I always say try to spread out your work. It's okay if for sometimes you might be struggling on some stuff and one assignment goes into the next week or whatever. But if you're not getting anything done in 1 week and all of that's going to the next week, it really snowballs on you and can become a big problem. So late work will not be accepted until the assignment is 100% correct, at which point 10% penalty is deducted. Will not be accepted until the assignment is... that probably needs to be reworded a little bit. So basically, you turn in something late. If you turn in something late, for one thing, you have to make sure that you communicate, hey, I'm turning in a late assignment. So you'll get 10% taken off the top of it. And then after that, you'll be graded. So if you did perfect, right? You did perfect on something, you'll start at a 90%. And if you got it, so everything was perfect, you get a 90%. If you got, 10% off, then, obviously you're going to get your first 10%. And if you missed, 10%, and you end up with an 80, right? One thing is we have these hands-on tests, and hands-on tests are worth, and we're going to look at this here in a minute, are worth a little more, quite a bit more as far as from a weighting perspective, and hands-on tests are very important. And so if you take a hands-on test, okay, you must completely, in order to submit a hands-on test late. So let's say you didn't do your hands-on test that was due on a Sunday or something. And then the next Monday, you want to submit it. Well, you have to make sure that, there's all these lab assignments that are also part of what that hands-on test is. And so you have to complete all of them before you can submit the hands-on test, okay? I'm not saying you don't have to have 100% like on everything, but you have to submit all of your work. You have to submit all of the labs before you can make up a hands-on test, okay? If you turn it in on time, you can turn in a hands-on test without having something, maybe one of your other assignments submitted. I hope that's not too confusing there, but we'll go over that again here in the future when we get closer to taking the first hands-on test. There's not as many hands-on tests. There's a lot of other assignments, very few hands-on tests. There's probably gonna be like maybe 5 or 10 throughout the course. For the other assignments, there's a lot more. Course grading. So we use a weighted average, and I wanted to show you actually something about that too. So the final project is worth 10%, hands-on test is worth 40, homework is worth 20, labs worth 20%, and written test is worth 10%. So I do have a document, an Excel spreadsheet I want to kind of share and show you a few things on. So I wanted to kind of explain a little bit. So this is basically the same as what we have here for our final project, hands-on test, homework, labs, and written test. Same weighted average, okay? Kind of just wanted to show you something just to make you aware of how this kind of works. So you got a final project. I'm just assuming we're getting like an 80% on everything, right? So we end up with our final grade being 80%. This is our weighted percentage. So how this basically works is we use the weight, 10% times what, well here, let's do it this way. Let's just say this is the total amounts available for a final project. I think it is 100. So let's say this is the most you can get, and let's say you got an 80, right? So that's an 80%. So the way you figure out your weighted percentage is you take your 80% is what you got on the final project, and you multiply that by your percentage weight. And so in this case, you're going to have an 8, right? And you do the same thing for all of these. So your hands-on test, let's say it was a total points available. And this isn't an accurate amount of points here. This is just for illustrative purposes. So let's just say you have 1,000 points total on hands-on test, and you get 800 of them. That's an 80, and you do the same thing. It's going to be 40% of 80. It's going to be 32. Okay, it's going to be 32. So as you can see, 40%, you're getting a lot more. Here, your 10% of your 80 is going to be 8. Here, your 40% of 80 is 32. That's significant, right? That's significant. And then homework, kind of the same thing. Homework's going to equate to 16 of an 80%. Labs here, and then the written test is kind of the same as the final project. And like I said, this isn't necessarily a true depiction on how many points, but I just kind of wanted to show you something so you realize, especially when you're looking at your assignments and you might see points, like this thing's 10 points and this thing's 100 points. Points kind of matter within one specific area. So let's just say you've got a lab that's 200 points and you have a lab that's 100 points. Obviously, the 200 points is going to help you get a better grade than the 100-point one, right? Okay, but trying to compare a 100-point lab assignment, let's say you have a 100-point lab assignment and a 100-point hands-on test. Well, the hands-on test you're going to get a bigger number here for your 100-point hands-on test. And so let me just show you an example here real quick, just to show you how this kind of works. So let's say you got an 80. Let's just say hands-on test, we only have one. Let's just say we only have one the whole semester, and it's 100, you know. And so we make this an 80. Okay, we're back to that. So let's just say for some reason we didn't do it. Okay, and like I said, this is only 100 points, right? Let's just say you didn't do this. You've got 80% on everything you did, and you said, you know, I don't have time to do this hands-on test. So this is what's going to happen to your grade. Your grade went from an 80% down to a 48% because you didn't do your hands-on test. Even though the points are 100, it's only 100 points. That's why I'm kind of, wanted to kind of show you this, right? Because it really makes a big difference, right? So let's just put this back to 80 again. So then you're back there, if you didn't do the final project. I'm not encouraging you not to do it, but you didn't do this, yeah, you almost passed. It's almost passed, right? But, that would still be a failing grade, but you almost passed. If because it's still worth 10% of your grade. So, but what a difference, right? What a difference for that hands-on test. So just keep that in mind. Hands-on tests are very important. And this is kind of how the grade weighting works. So don't always look at a 100-point hands-on test being the same as a 100-point point lab, right? Because here you could actually almost do, couldn't quite do a 0 on that. You could do almost half points. You'd, almost pass there on that, right? So that's getting a 50%. But yeah, even this hands-on test, you just did a 50% on this. Yep. Even 50%, you're still failing. Okay. So just kind of want to make a point there. Just kind of keep that in mind. Okay. All right. So here's the overall grade scale. So to get a C, you need a 74.5. Anything below that, it's basically does not meet the course requirements, even though it's not officially officially an F. It will actually show up on your grade book as an F. There basically is no D's. It's basically an A. There's an A, B plus, B, C plus, C, and there's an F. Okay. I'm just going to go a little bit more here. I probably didn't even mention it early on. So I usually go about an hour, and then we take like 10-minute break, and we'll come back and continue on. But I want to try to go ahead and at least get through this. Get through a little bit of this, and then we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break. So as far as workload table, so here's your instructor-led lectures. This could be like 80 out. This is this whole course is basically considered 320 contact hours, right? So if you basically take 320 and divide that by 16, you're going to come up with a 20, right? So that's where those 20 hours kind of come in. Okay, you may use less than 20 hours. Okay, you may or it may take you more than 20 hours every week. So this 320 could be higher or lower. All depends, right? But for the most part, instructor led is about 80 hours. So this 80 hours comes up to about, basically in the 16 weeks comes up to about 5 hours a week. So it's 5 hours a week will be lecture, and then also I'll basically either a combination of these live lectures and then also some other individual videos that I'll also do as well. Okay, so that kind of come up to your 80 hours there. And then out of class preparation, about 40 hours worth of reading. And And the reason some of this stuff, and I kind of didn't mention this earlier, so, we have these things, we have these exercises, we have these homework, we have these labs, and it can be maybe a little bit confusing. And the reason it's kind of like that, it was kind of more designed for the in-person classes, because sometimes that homework, you'd get assigned that on you'd get that on a Monday, and you'd have to bring that back the next day to complete it, or like, okay. And so it really doesn't work well with an online course. So sometimes you had the homework would be given like that in the in-person classes, but for the online stuff, it probably doesn't work well. So sometimes kind of confusing. Well, what makes this an exercise? What makes this homework? What makes this lab? For our purposes, just go back up here for a minute again. Basically, our exercises and labs, that's in those coursework assignments. If you go to your coursework tab and click on like the lab one, it'll say exercises and labs. They're all considered lab. Okay, that's 20%. Homework's considered 20%. Okay, so all of your assignments, pretty much, your basic weekly assignments are usually going to be homework, lab, homework, and written test. And the homework and the labs are always going to be 20%. Okay, written tests are 10%, but these are always going to be 20%. So it's pretty much the same on that. Because I know that there's going to be some things that are going to say these are homework. This is an exercise. This is a lab. They're all going to be 20%. Okay. So that is for homework and written test hours, and then your lab assignments 120. So that's those labs, and it might be a little different. We are using the labs out of the book. Prior semesters of this course, we had, this may actually be a little less. I don't know. We'll have to kind of see when we get there, but it doesn't matter. It's basically, this is kind of the structure of that. And so basically 320 contact hours. So that's going to average about 20 a week, right? So we will have we do have tutor assistant stuff. But here I'll go ahead and, for our class, I'm going to go ahead and I'll send you information on our tutor if you need them. If you have any kind of accommodations or whatever that you need, contact Mr. Patrick Glenn, which I'm sure you all know him, because I believe you would have to have talked to him to have enrolled. But if not, here's his contact information. There's his phone number, and there's his email. And this is within the syllabus. You can just pull up the syllabus and get that. Also, just want to mention we do have some career services that sometimes post some jobs that are available. All right. So what I think we'll go ahead and do is go ahead and take a 10-minute break here and come back and talk about the course schedule. And from there, we're going to go ahead and do the lecture on Chapter 1. Okay, as far as the course schedule is concerned, well, like I said, this is going to be changing often, but it's worth looking at, just kind of see what's coming up, okay? So for this week, getting started task, complete the questionnaire if you haven't. Watch the course welcome video. Setting up your environment. There's both the video and there's also a document. Read the Chapter 1. And then for our Chapter 1 assignments, and I will go ahead and actually on day 2, I will go ahead and do I will do the first written test. So all you'll have to do is watch that video, and you'll have your first written test done, and I'll also do some of the exercises as well. Okay, and that will be tomorrow, though. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but I do want to mention also, for first semester students, there is going to be, I think there's just one video. I think there's just one video, and I will send that to you. And I just need you to, state that you did, in fact, view it. Okay? I'm going to send you I'm actually taking a video they have, and I have to record it with YouTube, and then I'll just send that out to you, and you can just respond that you actually did see that. Okay, yeah, not a lot I really want to go through here, but basically, what we're going to have is you're going to have some, our live lectures usually going to be like on a Monday and a Tuesday for the most part. This week kind of have a little bit more to go through. So we got 3 days of lectures, and they may be cut a little short. They may not be completely, I think I had 9 to 11:30. They may be a little shorter than that. But basically, so for the most part, you're going to at least have there'll be lectures on Monday and Tuesday of most weeks, okay? And then lab days the rest, okay? So in this week, we have a lab day. And lab day is just a day that you can do whatever. It's not necessary, because I know we have labs. It can be working on the written test, the homework, a hands-on test, whatever. It's this day, really don't need to call it lab day. Lab's just kind of traditional ranking talk, because usually that's what they always consider everything. Lab days are days when you're just hands-on type stuff, right? So, like I said, lab day, you can do any of your assignments, obviously. And then what's going to happen here this following week on Monday is Labor Day. So just kind of wanted to mention, like I already said, that for online courses, we really don't count holidays like the same as for an in-person class. And I will make all of the assignments available, but I'm not going to lecture on those days. Anytime there's a holiday, I won't lecture on that day. But I will make all the assignments available in case you want to work on them. Okay? But like I said, that even though it kind of doesn't count for online courses, holidays, the 16-week course will be, will end a little earlier than it will for an in-person class. So it's not like they're getting something off and you're not. So just want to mention that. And then obviously when we come back on like week 2, since Labor Day, the next day we'll go ahead and get back to our live lectures. Okay. So basically, and I'm just going to come down here. So we're going to start getting down here. We're going to do some more advanced bootstrap stuff. So we'll be getting through this book rather quickly. I think for the most part, we're going to be doing almost every chapter but chapter 11. And we might be doing some more advanced bootstrap stuff, and we'll learn what bootstrap is. Just a kind of a framework library that can be used to create some really cool things on the website. Okay. And then after that, we will go ahead and start working on the JavaScript book and the JavaScript part of this course. And I apologize, there's not more information here. It's just because there's a new book, new curriculum this semester, so we're a little behind. We're not quite there where we want to be yet. So, please bear with us, and we'll get there. Okay. So, also there will be we also will have a midterm. And the midterm will just be a hands-on assignment. Same for a final, it's a hands-on assignment, okay? Midterm, I think we just make that part of a lab grade, to be honest with you. We don't have that separated out like we do a final. I think the midterm will probably be like 2 lab assignments or something, be like 200 points as opposed to 100 points, okay? But we'll have some kind of a midterm assignment. Probably after we already at least do a little bit of JavaScript stuff. But most of it will be, most of the knowledge needed will be what you learn from the HTML, CSS stuff. But then we'll also, there'll be a little bit of JavaScript knowledge there needed as well. Okay. We'll worry about that when we get closer to that. So that's about all I have here on the syllabus. I'm not going to go through every day, every week here. The important thing is, just always remember this is kind of just a suggested kind of schedule. This will change. If you want to know what's really due a certain week, Inside Ranking is your best choice on that, your best thing to look at. Okay, chapter 1 is about introduction to the internet and web design. Our objectives: define the internet and associated key terms, recognize internet protocols, discuss web browsers and identify their main features, describe the types and purposes of websites, plan a website for a target audience, define a wireframe and a sitemap, explain how websites use graphics, navigation tools, typography, and color. Design for accessibility, design for multi-platform display, define the hypertext markup language, which is HTML, and HTML elements, recognize HTML version and web programming languages, identify web authoring tools, download and use a web authoring tool, create and view a basic HTML page. So this chapter reviews how to create a web page. The roadmap identifies general activities. So, yeah, okay. You ain't going to really spend any time on that. There, okay. So, the internet's a worldwide collection of computers. It's linked together by organizations, individuals using communications, devices, and media. So when you hear the word node, okay, a node is any device. A node could be a computer, a tablet, a smartphone. It could be some kind of a sensor that's on the network. They at a lot of like water treatment plants or different things like that. They have sensors, right? Sensors can also be a node. Anything that's kind of connected to any kind of a device can be connected to the internet is a node. Okay. A network is a collection of two or more computers linked together to share resources, information. Now, we always look at, the internet's the biggest network of them all, right? But, basically we could take just in a home, you could take we could connect, most computers. Nowadays, sometimes they make computers just for Wi-Fi only, but most computers have a thing that's called Ethernet thing that you connect. We could actually connect two computers together. That would be our little network of our two little computers, not have any internet access, and we just do that, right? Some companies have a system, a network system, where they have all of their computers connected by these Ethernet cables, right? And this could be what's called an intranet. We're going to get into that in a little bit, but multiple different computers connected, and they could be connected, and that's actually outside of the internet, right? So that's just basically your own little personal network, right? So a network is a collection of two or more computers linked. The Internet of Things. So the Internet of Things is basically all of the different devices connected to the network, including your smartphone, your laptop, television, appliances, right? Nowadays you have appliances, microwaves, dishwashers connected. You have all these different sensors. I was talking about like a water treatment plant. There's all kinds of different sensors that are connected to the internet nowadays, cameras and everything else, right? So that's all part of that Internet of Things. So data lines that connect networks allow data to move from one computer to another, right? The internet backbone is a collection of high-speed data lines that connect major computer systems located around the world, right? So there are a lot of computers, even though from our perspective we use Wi-Fi, we're used to just having your laptop or your phone and you're connected to a Wi-Fi. But, in the internet, really the internet uses all these, there's all kinds of servers. They're connected to each other. There are cables, right? The internet backbone is a bunch of a bunch of servers and computers that are connected together with cables, right? So the internet's backbone is a collection of high-speed data lines that connect major computer systems located around the world. An internet service provider, ISP, is a company that has a permanent connection to the internet backbone. Okay, so ISPs, say Charter Communications. There's all kinds of different fiber companies nowadays. AT&T. There's all kinds of different other small companies that have popped up. So a lot of them are internet service providers. The World Wide Web. The World Wide Web is also called the web. Is the service that provides access to information on web servers, right? So really, the internet is not the internet and the web is not really the same thing, right? Believe it or not. The internet is basically that whole, the internet's all that, is all the computers that are networked together. That's the whole internet, right? The web is things that are servers that have a collection of linked files, okay, known as web pages. So you can actually we can talk about this more in the future. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. You can actually do things on the internet that are not part of the web, right? Uploading a file uses a different protocol, right? The hypertext transfer protocol is the language of the web, the HTTP, right? And we'll talk about that here as well, right? So all of the web basically runs on the internet, kind of thing, right? So the web consists of a collection of linked files known as web pages. A website is a related collection of web pages created and maintained by a person, company, education institution, or other organization. A home page is the first document users see when they access a website. And a lot of these servers, they actually, the way things are set up, and also from a server standpoint, a server can be a piece of hardware, right? Like a computer, which it is a type of computer from a hardware perspective. But then there's also software that is installed on these servers, and they kind of call that servers too. It's kind of the software server. So there's software that's installed on these, because by itself, a server is just a box, right? It's just a box that has a bunch of different hardware components, right? But it's not really anything until you're doing something with that. So usually you have some kind of software packages installed on that, right? And for it to be a true web server and to serve up like web pages, it needs to have a web server software installed on that, okay? A hyperlink, commonly known as a link, is an element that connects one web page to another web page on the same server or any other web server around the world. Protocols. So protocol is not necessarily always used for computers or the internet. A protocols, is a term that's kind of used outside of that as well, right? So protocol is basically just a set of rules that define something, okay? And it's not always computer related, but for our purposes, a protocol is a set of rules that define how a client workstation can communicate with a server. So a server is a host computer that stores the resources and files for websites, right? And like I said, it's usually going to have some software that's installed that kind of manages that, right? It has some, takes care of some of that, right? But the hypertext transfer protocol, called HTTP, is a set of rules for exchanging text, graphics, audio, video, and other multimedia files on the web. The file transfer protocol is used to exchange files from one computer to another over the internet. Okay? It does not provide a way to view a web page. So like the file transfer protocol, as you see, it's something that exchanges files from one computer over the internet. And so the file transfer protocol really isn't part of the web, right? It's actually it's a protocol on the internet. When we're talking about web, we're talking about the hypertext transfer protocol, HTTP, okay? Then there's other protocols as well, and these are kind of very networking related protocols. Transmission control protocol is TCP, And the Internet Protocol is IP. It's a pair of protocols used to transfer data effectively over the internet by properly routing it to its destination. Okay. The Internet Protocol ensures data is sent to the correct location. Okay, and then there's also what's called a domain name server, DNS. DNS associates an IP address with a domain name. So when you go in a browser, let's say you put in a name of a web, a web page, right? A website. Let's say you put in ESPN, ESPN.com. So the way this works is basically what you put in there actually goes to a domain name server, okay? And that gets associated with an IP address. That the ESPN has a specific, all websites have an IP address, right? A bunch of numbers, right? 192.15.85. There's different IP addresses. So every website has a specific IP address. And so for us, we wouldn't want to have to know that, right? You wouldn't have to, I need to know the IP address so I can get to this website. So DNS server was something that was created many, many years ago so that you can put in a name and it's going to take that and it's going to associate with that IP address, and that IP address is associated with that server, right? So that IP address is more like server talk, right? Computer talk, right? So that server, that domain name server knows which server to contact, right? For you, you're just putting in a name, ESPN.com. After that, you don't know really what happens, but it goes to a domain name server, and then from there it goes ahead and passes that along to that IP address and what servers associated with that IP address. Interpret web browsers. Web browsers interpret and display web pages. Enable for you to view and interact with a web page. Here's some popular ones: Microsoft Edge, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, and Opera. Uniform Resource Locator. So a Uniform Resource Locator, called a URL, is the address of a document or a file accessible on the internet. So here they've got www.w3. This is actually an organization to do with, we're going to learn about some of these. But this is an organization to do with rules and different specifications and so forth. So a Uniform Resource Locator is basically your address of your document. So the ESPN.com, that's URL, right? A domain is an area of the internet a particular organization or person manages. So the domain is basically ESPN.com is actually a domain. The URL is all of this. I probably should have stated this. URL is this complete URL. Okay, and a long time ago, you had to put www, right? You had to put that actually in your browser. Early days of the internet. Nowadays, you don't have to do that. You could just put in, right? Well, this is kind of a multiple. It has multiple periods here, but ESPN.com. All you got to do is put ESPN.com. You don't have to prefix it. Years ago, early days, you had to prefix it. But the domain is an area of the internet of a particular organization. So the organization, the domain name, ESPN. ESPN is the domain name, right, for that site. Okay, just some basics on the, I could make this a little bigger. Probably should at least show this a little bit. So your protocol, so by default, it's going to put this kind of in there. It depends on your browser and stuff like that. But the true URL actually has the protocol in there. So there's HTTPS. Whenever you see an S, that means secure. Almost everything's got to be secure nowadays. Even the browsers sometimes won't even display things. They'll give you a warning message because everything really should be HTTPS. It's Hypertext Transfer Protocol. S, it stands for secure. So It's basically it's a secure version of the hypertext transfer protocol. Okay, so there's your protocol, that first part. Then your server, your domain name. Okay, your domain name is going to be, your ESPN.com is going to be your domain name in my example from earlier. Then you have what's called a web page location, and then all of these kind of depend on how something is configured. It depends on how sometimes the different websites have things different configured, but sometimes you have a web page location, and then you have a specific file, right? And sometimes it's more follows some kind of a logical directory structure that's all set up. Like they'll have on them servers, you're going to have folders, and then a lot of times to access a file in that folder, you're going to have the folder name, which would be the web page location, and then you'd have a specific file name, and a file name always is going to have to be an HTML. To be able to view it in a browser is going to be an HTML document. Types of website. So an internet site is another term for a website that is generally available to anyone. It's basically public access. An intranet. Okay. Intranet. So you have to write there with an A. Intranet is a private network that uses internet technologies to share company information among employees. So an intranet type setup where you or I, unless we belong to that, we cannot access that, okay? And a lot of times, maybe like campuses, like sometimes like a big school campus or a big company, maybe a company might have 20 different buildings, is major headquarters, right? Some companies have major headquarters. They might have 20 different buildings for this company, and it's just in a small geographic area, and they have them everything connected together, and that's intranet. They, people who work for that company have access to things where you and I as wouldn't, if we're in a public domain, we wouldn't have access to that, right? So just remember, an intranet is a private network. Okay, so is an extranet. Intranet is a public, basically a public network, right? Anyone can access. Sometimes you might have to have a login, right? But you can at least get to it. Might say, okay, under your login, well, I don't have a login. Well, I don't have a subscription. You can't do that, maybe, right? But you can get to it. If you're getting to it from a public on the internet, then basically it is an internet site. An intranet site is a private network, and so you might not be able to get to it at all, okay? And the same thing with an extranet. So an extranet is a private network that uses internet technology to share business information with select corporate partners or key customers. So you might have a company that, sells widgets, right? And then you sell widgets, but you have all these customers that buy the widgets, right? So all these different companies that buy widgets is part of your extranet, right? So they have access to, some information, some web pages that are not on the internet, right? It's outside of your organization. It's kind of called an extranet, okay? Many company websites also support electronic commerce, e-commerce, the buying and selling of goods and services on the internet. And you have educational institutions use a learning management system, LMS, to simplify course management. So Inside Rankin is an LMS, okay? An LMS is a web-based software application designed to facilitate online learning. So a lot of what we can do, really, ours is a pretty bare bones type learning management system. It's more for coursework and this and that. We do a lot of things outside of our LMS for our course, right? But there's other LMSs as well, right? They're much more of a platform. But an LMS is a learning management system. Planning a website. So the purpose of a website. So different things that are part of planning a website, you have to define the purpose of a website. Who's your target audience? What's your multi-platform display? So to, obviously it's important to know the purpose and why are you building this website. And if all this information is available somewhere, then maybe you shouldn't be building a website on that unless there's something special about your website as opposed to another website, right? Target audience is always important. Who's your target audience? Are they, you know, are they, students? Are they instructors? Are they, somebody who belongs to, has interest in certain hobbies, sports or outdoors or whatever, right? So who's your target audience? What's the demographics around that? And also multi-platform display. So you can build nowadays, you really should be building your website for multiple type of clients, right? When we're talking about client, we're talking about, a phone or a smartphone, a laptop, a computer, a tablet, right? You have different clients there, right? So things are a lot easier nowadays. Okay, and actually the Bootstrap stuff, we'll get to that, and we'll show before that, but Bootstrap's really good at being able to build things so they work across multiple clients, right? Long time ago, things were very difficult, and most of the time you would select one, you'd build everything from that. You'd almost have to start from scratch for a different client, and be very difficult, right? Very difficult and time consuming. Now there's a lot of tools and resources to kind of make things work across multiple clients, right? But you need to determine that, maybe because there's sometimes there's people that don't really want to access something on a PC or that. They're going to always use their phone. But then there's, so that'd be more of like a mobile first type strategy, right? You want to make sure things work on mobile before it works on anything else. But there's a lot of corporate type websites that maybe most of the people accessing that are sitting at a workstation within a company, and they're usually have either got a laptop that's docked or they've got a PC, and they're not accessing things on their phone, right? Some websites are just too busy and too much stuff going on. Depends on some very sophisticated ones that really are better for like a desktop or a laptop situation, right, where you can see everything. Wireframe's a simple visual guide that clearly identifies the location of the main page elements. So you're just kind of showing what something looks like, right? Active white space in the area on the page that is intentionally left blank. I don't know, passive web space in the space between content. Yeah, well, it's just talking about, there's a benefit in white space because when you got white space around things, it makes other things stand out. Helps the user focus on one part of the page, right? How you design your, a website, and a wireframe is just kind of a tool, and a tool to show what it's kind of like your first attempt, your design, how it's going to look before you actually build it, right? That's what your wireframe is. And there's tools to do wireframes, but wireframe can be just something that you take a piece of paper and you design it all on a piece of paper. You just all by hand, pencil on paper, and there's your wireframe, right? So here's a idea of a wireframe as well. Showing where you're going to put things. Here's your logo. Here's your navigation. Here's your banner. Images, right? So this is very good. These are always good things. If you're a coder, you're a programmer, you want things like usually, for us, we're going to kind of be doing all of it. But the big organization, that's someone's job to create things like this, and then usually coders are going to take that and build the website based on that, right? Another tool is called the sitemap. So a sitemap is a planning tool that lists or displays all the pages on a website and how they're related to each other. And let me find an example of this. So for ESPN, actually how I had to get to this, a lot of times you kind of go to a bottom of a main page, usually like your home page. If you go to the very bottom of a home page, a lot of times you'll see a sitemap, a little link with sitemap. Actually, for ESPN, I'm not quite sure all the ways to get to it. I just actually did a search. I just did a Google search ESPN and space sitemap, and it had this. So here's kind of a sitemap where it's got these different categories, right? And then it has different links, right? So this is kind of a sitemap with different categories and different links. So and it's pretty extensive. So there's NFL, Major League Baseball, right? Different sports and that. So pretty substantial, and they just have other things on here as well. But this is kind of a sitemap. Okay. So so it's the structure of a website. A linear website structure connects web pages in a straight line. A hierarchy website connects web pages in a tree-like structure. Okay. A website structure has no set organization. So different kinds of structures. Okay. Hierarchy, linear, kind of are webbed. So here's a linear structure. Home page goes to a training module 1, training module 2, training module 3. Just shows her how they're connected. It's really kind of sitemaps about connections, right? All right. And here, well, some things can be linked to other things. It's kind of a really just how things are all linked together on your site, right? So graphics add visual appeal to a web page and enhance the visitor's perception of the products and services. So this is very important. Navigation of a website should be clear and concise. So when you go to a web page, it should be easy to be able to get around. Each web page should have a designated navigation area with links to other pages in the site. Navigation area should be prominent and easy to use. The worst thing is to get to a website and not know how to get to something, right? So usually if you know some website has some functionality that you just can't figure out how to get to, it's usually not planned out very well. Typography or fonts and font styles enhance the visual appeal of a website. Combination of colors contributes to the appeal of the website. Now there are colors continued here. Yeah. So just showing some common meaning of different colors. So here's a site, color.hex.com. So, they show different color schemes, kind of really nice that can be very handy when you're wanting to create a website, having a set of palettes. So like if you want to do something autumn, this kind of here's some autumn colors, right? So these are palettes. Really helps out people like me who don't always know what kind of colors to put together. It's kind of very helpful, but different color palettes. So there's a bunch of different sites, and we'll be using something like this in the future. And so when we get there, we'll get into this in a little more depth. All right, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Accessibility is really important. So a web designer should create web pages for viewing by a diverse audience, including people with physical impairments and global users. So when they're talking about global users, different languages, right? So if possible, it's not always possible to make things in different languages, but and it depends on your needs. If all of your if your target audience is always going to be American-based audience, then you don't have to really worry about that too much. But accessibility should really be important. It's very important for like government websites. You know, you have to they have laws and stuff in place that you have to make things accessible. If somebody has a visual, they're blind, have some visual type impairment. You have to provide things to they have screen readers, right? You have screen readers that'll read the screen. But you have to write your code to handle those to work well with those. Okay. If you're not thinking about accessibility when you're building something, then it's not going to work for like screen readers and so forth. Okay. The World Wide Web Consortium develops and maintains web standards, language specifications, and accessibility recommendations. So according to W3C, the goal of the web is to be accessible to all people, including those with disabilities that limit their ability to perform computer tasks. Okay. And there's the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, prohibits discrimination against those with disabilities. And then there's also this WCAG as well. Okay. Planning checklist. So just telling you, you should have planning checklists, navigation, topography, color, accessibility, are all the basic web page design criteria to consider when developing a website. Just go out there and start creating things, right? There needs to be a process behind what you're doing and planning and review, and you get some feedback, right? It's very important in any kind of software type thing. Even if you're just come up with some idea. If you come up with some idea that you're thinking, I want to build something, I have this idea. Best idea to build something really simple, and you don't want to spend all the time making this wonderful product if you really want to just build like what's called a proof of concept, POC. And you just want something really basic, and you get a little input from some people, right? And then you keep on changing it, making it better and better, right? You keep iterating through it, improving things and stuff like that. You don't just get everything done and throw it out there, right? Understanding the basics of HTML. Web pages are created using hypertext markup language. Authority language used to create documents for the web. It consists of a set of special instruction called tags. So we'll learn all these tags starting tomorrow and define the structure and layout of the content on the web page. HTML tags define a markup of the content on the web page, due to which it is considered a markup language rather than a traditional programming language. So when we talk about HTML is a markup language. JavaScript's a programming language. C# programming language. You might not have heard all of these. I'm just kind of throwing some out there. There's a programming language called Java that's similar to C#, and I know it has the same sounding, or it starts with the same part as JavaScript, right? JavaScript and Java are two separate different technologies. Java, though, is a programming language. JavaScript's a programming language. C# is a programming language. Python, and many others. Okay, markup languages. HTML is considered a markup language. There's a bunch of those as well, but for the most part, XML is probably the next one most popular is XML, which stands for Extensible Markup Language. But HTML is what we use to build web pages, and yes, it's considered a markup language. So a web page is a text file that contains both content and HTML tags, and is saved as an HTML document. And the way it's saved is by an HTML document is, well, one, you have to kind of have the tags in there, and then you have to save it as .html. We're used to .text files or whatever, but HTML file needs to be .html. If you have a HTML file as .txt, like text, that's not gonna render in the browser, right? It's not going to render the HTML, right? Your tags. So an HTML element consists of everything from the start tag to the end tag. That's your element. We'll get into that later. We'll see an example here. And HTML elements can be enhanced by using attributes, which define additional characteristics or properties of an element. Okay. So let's make this even a little bigger, maybe. So here's your HTML start tag, right? And then here's at the line 8 is your HTML end tag, okay? So all documents, all your other HTML has to be within your beginning HTML tag and your end HTML tag. There's also a declaration that goes at the top, and I'm not sure if it's going to, yeah, I think we will see that here in a little bit. But so this is the HTML start tag. It's always going to start with an open bracket. There's your HTML. And then L, this is an attribute. Okay, and this sets the language of the browser to English, EN for English. Okay. Head tag, there's some special stuff that goes in there, which we'll talk later. But it is as you can see, the title is also in the head tag, right? There's other things in the head tag. So here you've got a title tag. So this title tag, here's the beginning of the title tag. Here's the start tag. Here's the end tag. So the begin and end tag for your title is all within your head tag here, okay? And here's your content, okay? And we'll see this in action here a lot more tomorrow. But this web page example, this is going to actually show up inside the browser, inside the in the browser, not in the content, but actually within the tab. We'll see this tomorrow. All right. So HTML combines tags and descriptive attributes to define how a document should appear in a web browser. HTML elements include headings, okay, paragraphs, hyperlinks, lists, and images. All of these have certain tags, right? Okay, these all have a start tag and an end tag and follow the same rules or syntax. HTML elements are called paired tags and use the syntax start tag, then whatever content you have, and it could be other tags. In the case what we were just looking at, we had the beginning HTML tag and the end HTML tag, and there was other tags within there, right? Some of them are going to have, have words and content. Others will be just other tags, right? But HTML elements are called paired tags, which use the start tag, all the content in the middle, and the end tag, which has the following meaning. HTML elements begin with a start tag or opening tag, such as title. We looked at that title. HTML elements finish with an end tag or closing tag, such as / title, right? So you always got to remember that / You don't want to, sometimes, that's easy beginner mistake is not having an end tag for every start tag, okay? But these are for paired tags. There's some other ones that are a little more, they're special and a little different. And we're going to look at that here too. Content is inserted between the start and end tags. Some HTML elements are void of content. They are called empty or void tags. So break, BR. Break is just a break on a line. So like let's say you've got a bunch of paragraphs and you want to put an extra line, you put a break tag, a BR tag, just like that. You don't need to have you don't have to put an end tag. Okay, these are special ones, and they're called empty or void, right? And they don't have the end tag, right? HR stands for horizontal rule, okay, and that's another one of those. And the syntax is just the tag name without the end tag. You don't have anything in between it. You just have it. It provides a certain function. The BR is a break tag. It just gives you another line break, basically, right? And the HR tag is a horizontal rule line, a horizontal line, right? Nothing in between. Okay. So here we're looking at some content a little bit. It didn't mention about this. This is called a declaration. And as you kind of notice, all of these other tags, these are all lowercase. This is the only one that has this doc type, okay? Basically, by doing this, we're telling this is going to cover this here in a minute, that you're telling this that this is a HTML5 is the version. Even though it doesn't say that here, that's what this does. This is what that tells it, okay? This is kind of a communication with the browser, okay? Saying, hey, I'm an HTML5 document. So that means anything that, because sometimes older versions, over HTML, it's best, you need to actually tell them, you need to tell the browser you're using an older version. And we'll talk about that later, though. But here's some content tags. P stands for paragraph. And all of this is within a body tag, right? We got a body tag for all of our body of basically our content here. We got a bunch of P tags, and we got a horizontal rule. Then we got another B tag after P tag after that. And this is basically a paragraph tag. P for paragraph, and you're ending each paragraph, right? Here, if you can look at this line 10 at the end, you got a break, a BR tag. So that's going to put a break. So it's within a P tag. You got this break. It's actually going to add an extra line before you end your P tag. Okay. So if you looked at this within the browser, and we're going to see this a lot tomorrow. Okay. If you see it within a browser, it's going to actually have a break. And yep, just a lot of paragraph tags. And we'll go through some of this as well. So this is kind of showing you the results. That web page title. The web page title is actually within your tab, right? Web page title goes in your tab. So that's one of those kind of special ones that go up here. Pretty much everything else, not pretty much, everything else is going to be within the browser window, okay? It's going to be within the browser window. But web page titles, that special one that's just going to be at the very, it's going to, when you bring up, if you got a title, you bring it up, all right? It's going to be in there. So let's just look at this real quick. So this is inside ranking. This is the title. This is a title tag. This is for the book thing, responsive web design. That's the title tag they have, okay? So that's kind of a special kind there. And just want to point out, you've got the line break here. Right after that line, you had the BR tag. And so then it actually ends up going to everything after that goes to the next line. Let's just go back and look at that real quick. After the word break, we have the BR tag. So this actually went to the next line, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't matter. Even if let's say we get rid of this break, even though you put this on the separate line, this is still it's going to ignore white space. When the browser is going to ignore all your little different white space. So you can't just put things on different lines and it's automatically going to be on different lines. You have to control it a little differently than that, okay? So by putting this break here, it actually does create a break. Right after that, it's going to take everything and put it on the next line. And then here's the horizontal rule, right here, the HR tag. And that just creates a line. That's one of those where you don't have an end tag, HR and the BR. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, XML. So XML is another markup language. These are technologies related to to HTML. I guess I'll go up here a little bit. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. And it's really all about like kind of defining data and stuff. We'll talk about that more in the future here, but just kind of mention an XML is another markup language, right? And then you got XHTML is extensible. So it's a rewritten version of HTML using XML that was developed in 2000 and is accepted by mobile device platforms. Okay, XHTML. All right, make this a little bit louder. Understanding the role of other programming language. So JavaScript is a popular client-side scripting language. And when we say, this is kind of, I understand what they're saying here. It's not actually 100% true. JavaScript has kind of evolved where you can actually, because actually the second year course that we have, one of the second year courses, we actually use JavaScript and we can do it on the server side. So client side, when we say client side, there's two different things when you're talking about the web. There's the client side and there's the server side. Client side is going to be running within your browser. When you hear client side, think it's something within your browser, okay? Even though you may go to a server to bring a file back, that file gets executed within the browser. That HTML gets executed in the browser. That cascading style sheets, which we haven't talked about that yet, gets executed in the browser. The JavaScript can get executed in the browser, right? But also, I'm just pointing this out now, but actually if there's any question or stuff, you probably should answer the question about JavaScript being, yes, it's a client-side technology, because it has been for years, but in recent times, there's been some where you can actually run some JavaScript on the server side, and we'll see that. We'll see a little bit that towards the end of this course, but you'll see that a lot more in the next course. But for the most part, yes, let's just go ahead and think of JavaScript as a client-side scripting language, and it's basically it's just a small little programming language that you can use to do things within a web page. Okay, it's used to create interactivity within a web browser. The web pages that contain JavaScript are named with an Well, actually, HTM here is a Microsoft. A long time ago, companies used to do things differently, and they've really worked hard on creating some standards and specifications on this is how you should do it. Microsoft originally had HTM files there instead of. I gotta watch what I do sometimes with these PowerPoints. They called theirs HTM instead of HTML. Okay, but they're just basically saying that JavaScript is embedded within HTML files. Okay. I don't think we're going to worry about the HTML too much here. jQuery. jQuery is a library of JavaScript. It's a library of different JavaScript kind of like functions that you can use to make some things easier. And we'll go through that. It's not as used as much. Other libraries and frameworks with JavaScript. It's basically a JavaScript framework library. But as time's gone on, it's not as popular as it once was. But we're going to still look at that in this course, because there's a lot of companies that are still using JavaScript out there. Even though a lot of new projects, they're using other kind of frameworks, there's just a lot of jQuery out there at different companies. Understanding the role of other web technologies. PHP kind of was like one of the original programming languages for the web. And it's still used quite a bit still. I never did much with PHP myself, but it was, I have used it a little bit. Basically, it's something that I had to kind of take over, but for the most part, there's other options as well. But PHP is called Hypertext Preprocessor. It's an open source server-side scripting language. It runs on the server side, right? Because we talked about the client side's in your browser. The server side's on some server somewhere else, right? That server could be in the same room as you, or it could be all over on the internet on a different country. It could be wherever, right? But server runs on a machine different than what you're. Well, I shouldn't even say that. You could have a server running on your same machine too, but it's not running the browser. Let's just say that. That's probably the correct way for me to explain that. Client side's always within the browser. If you're accessing a thing outside the browser, you're getting it from the server. Active server pages, that's another server-side scripting technology that's was created by Microsoft. Pages that contain ASP scripts must have file names that end with the extension .asp. Yeah, and I didn't mention PHP is .php. Web authoring tools. Web pages can be created using HTML or a simple text editor. I use Notepad++ a lot, really for other things than you can do HTML with that. What we're going to be doing in this course, for the most part, we'll be using Visual Studio Code, right? We'll be using Visual Studio Code for ours, for all the stuff we do. Not that Notepad's got its purposes, and I do sometimes pull things up in Notepad. Like if I want to just take a look at one file, it's kind of sometimes an easy way to do that. I do that for a lot of text files and stuff, and I do use Notepad++ a lot. I do it for taking some notes as well. So different purposes for that. But Notepad++, well, you can write HTML code and that within there. Okay, but for our purposes, we're going to pretty much be using Visual Studio Code. Okay. So a text editor program allows one to enter, change, save, print text, which includes HTML tags. An HTML editor is a program that provides basic text editing functions and advanced features such as color coding for various tags, menus to insert tags, and spell checker. Okay. So here's some common text editors. Notepad++ is free. Atom. And then there's also TextMate is another one. Okay. So them are text editors where you're just, you're doing you're putting the tags in there. You're doing everything. You got to do every single part of that, right? That begin tag, put the tag, end tag, right? And we're going to be doing that as well in our Visual Studio Code, but that's one of those text editor type programs. But there's also this other idea of WYSIWYG. And WYSIWYG stands for what you see is what you get. And so basically what these are, I used this Adobe Dreamweaver years ago. I haven't used this in years, but it's something that's basically you can sit there and you're just looking at say a paragraph. You can just grab that paragraph and move it. Click and move, and you're just moving things around on a thing. It's what you see is what you get. It's, you don't really have to know all about coding. Obviously, knowing about coding helps, especially because sometimes you want to do some things that don't quite work out, dragging it around. But, it's made so you don't really have to be an expert in HTML and the different technologies. You just grab and move things around, okay? And that's what's called what you see, WYSIWYG, called WYSIWYG editors, okay? So you basically drag things around on the page. And then also there's this idea of online code editors. There's ones out there that you can actually log in. You don't even have to have a login, but you can go to a website where you can actually change some things in there. And I'll show you that as well. We'll go to there's W3 Schools and there's others ones as well that you can just go out there and play with things. So I'm going to show you that. So we'll be looking at that here in the near future as well. So creating a basic web page. Every HTML web page includes a basic HTML tags. Refer to the text to review the steps provided. Okay, so we're not going to be doing this like this, and I am going, tomorrow I'm going to help you do some of those early assignments, chapter 1 assignments. So we'll be doing that tomorrow. Not this specific thing, but we'll be following our assignment in the book, and we'll go ahead and be doing that in Visual Studio Code. So a quick chapter summary. In this chapter, what did we learn about? We learned about the internet. learned about a server. We learned what the client side. You got the client side, that's what's in the browser. You got the server side, that's on some outside the browser, right? And like I said, you can actually run, and we'll see this in the future and talk about this more. But a server can be running. You can actually run the server software stuff on your computer and kind of have it separated, even though it's on the same thing. But from a logical standpoint, it's kind of separated out. Client side's always, just remember, client side's always in the browser. Server side's outside the browser. But most of the time in a real world situation, server's not going to be in the same room or the same house or whatever. Not that you can't do that. I've done that before. I've had a server running on a computer, a separate computer, but a lot of times you're talking about a server being outside of where you're at, right? On the internet somewhere. It could be in a different city, a different state, different country, right? So that would be kind of the client side and the server side. We talked about the internet, and the internet's the biggest network in the world, right? The biggest network is the internet. And then we also talked about an intranet. An intranet is, say, maybe like a campus. Let's say a headquarter company. They got 20 different buildings. They got everything connected together, and they're using public don't have access to that. So all of the different employees and stuff can access intranet, but you and I, we're on the public internet. We can't access that, right? That was that intranet, right? Not internet, intranet. And they also had the extranet. That extranet was, maybe you've got a widget company and you provide, you have a bunch of, you're the supplier of these widgets, and you have a bunch of companies that sell these widgets, and so you have what's called an extranet site for just this select group of things to go order things and stuff like that on your thing, and maybe you don't want to be on the public internet, right? So you have an extranet site just for them. Let's see what else. Essential roles for creating web pages and revised tools. Yeah. So we talked about you got text editors, and then we also talked about WYSIWYG editors. WYSIWYG is what you see is what you get. You can move things around on the page. We kind of looked at some little bit of basic HTML there. We're gonna we're gonna do that a lot more tomorrow. So let's go ahead and end there, I guess. I will make this video available, and please let me know if you have any questions about anything, and we'll see you for Chapter 2 work. And like I said, I'll go ahead and work through some of these assignments and the written test here on day 2. So you guys can get off to a good start. Have a good day. See you later.